Well, good morning. We'll try that again. Good morning. I'm used to working with teenagers. Thank you so much for being here this morning and getting up so early. And thank you, Tipping Point, for giving me such a great reason and so encouraging to be here so early this morning. As a kid, I was not known as an early riser. In fact, I needed a lot of encouragement from my father. The Air Force Academy grad and Vietnam vet used to stand at attention outside my bedroom door playing his pretend bugle. Do, 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 do. I'll spare you the reenactment, but you get what I mean. So I'm just so grateful, though, to be here with all of you this morning. Recently, my 7-year-old daughter, Haley, visited me at Fly, and she left a message for me on my whiteboard that reads, "Dear Christa," not Mom, Christa, "thank you for teaching kids how to live different lives." Even at her young age, she really gets what our work is really about. Now, when I was a kid, I had an experience that planted a seed that shaped me to do this work. I really wanted to fly on an airplane all by myself to visit my grandmother in Arizona, and I begged and begged my mother. And finally, she said I could go if I promised to be good, and if at all times I would act like a little lady. I was so excited when I boarded that plane. I was all dressed up in my mother's favorite outfit. It was this big blue dress with ruffles and lace, and it even had a giant bow on the back. I was in white tights, patent leather shoes, and I had matching ribbons in my hair. I hated that outfit, but I was so excited to be on that plane. And when I sat down, my feet were barely touching the floor, and I smoothed out my dress, and I clipped on my little plastic wings, making sure to be a little lady. And as I looked all around the plane, I noticed behind me there was a man who was sitting in handcuffs. And on either side of him were 2 men who looked like guards. And I spent most of the flight craning my neck to look back. And I watched this man as he tried to drink a cup of coffee, as he flipped through a magazine, and as he looked out the window. And it seemed to me he seemed very lost and sad. Now, when the plane landed, the man in handcuffs and I were the last to leave because we both had to be escorted. And when we got to the end of the ramp, there were only 3 people there. My gushing Irish grandmother waving a teddy bear. But all that was there for the man in handcuffs were 2 more men, armed guards. And as I hugged my grandmother, I watched as he walked away down this long, long ramp. And I thought to myself, what had he done? How did he get into so much trouble? Years later, I met much younger versions of the man in handcuffs when I was a law student at Northwestern. And I was roped into teaching incarcerated kids about the law. I met 15, 16, and 17-year-old kids who were looking at 10 years, 20 years, some even life in prison. Now, I hadn't expected to care about these kids because at that point, my life was on a very different path. When I was 16 years old, my best friend was raped. And at that moment, I decided I wanted to be a lawyer, and I wanted to go put people in jail to keep the world a safer place. And so I signed up that morning to volunteer because I really wanted to just see how bad these kids really were. I had no intention of really helping. But over and over again, their statements to me would start with, "If only. If only I had known how much trouble I could get into. If only someone had cared about me, I wouldn't be here." And so I decided to do what my law professors had taught me: take a step back, be objective, and gather the facts. And here's what I found. Over 90% of kids who are incarcerated say they don't feel they have a meaningful relationship with a positive adult role model. Over 80% don't know how to solve problems without violence and without crime. And most kids who are incarcerated know very little about the legal system and how much trouble they really can get into. Their faces and their voices started haunting me, and I realized I just had to step in and do something. These kids, when I transferred out to Stanford to finish my degree, I found that the stories and the statistics were really the same. They told me how they'd grown up in homes and neighborhoods where they had been physically, emotionally, even sexually abused at times, where they had friends, parents, cousins, and aunts, uncles, even grandparents in and out of jail, making it seem like a rite of passage. But these kids that I worked with were adamant They wanted to break the cycle. They didn't want other kids to end up like them, standing in their shoes or sleeping in their cells. But they felt powerless to change it. And they looked to me, the soon-to-be law school grad, to do something about it. And I realized that I knew too much at that point to stand by and do nothing. So on my last day of volunteering, I promised I would help. And they gave me the ideas that are now the basis of FLY's programs. Legal education, so kids understand the consequences. Mentoring with positive adult role models to show our kids that there really is another way. And leadership training, so we can redirect our kids' strengths and talents so that they can help instead of hurt their communities. And together, our kids do over 2,500 hours of community service every year. My daughter really got it right. At the core, our programs are all about helping kids live different lives. And we love our clients. And it's amazing when you love a young person, how quickly they can change and grow. We also know that love is a difficult thing to quantify and measure, but at FLY, we're committed to caring about our kids in a way that is smart, sustainable, and has a significant impact. And this is really important because if we don't intervene, we know that many of these kids are going to continue down a dangerous path that will dead end in costly incarceration. Whereas taxpayers, we spend over $100,000 a year per kid that we incarcerate. And the research shows over 50 to 80% will just cycle right back in. In FLY's most expensive program, we spend about $8,000 per kid per year. And during that program year, we find over 80% do not go back on probation, get engaged in school, and have hopes and plans and goals for their future. This morning, I am really privileged and honored and excited to introduce to you one of FLY's very first clients, Darshay Smith. Just last week, FLY had an event for our 10th anniversary, and Darshay shared her story. And it was so inspirational that we've invited her to be with you here this morning to share a little bit about what her FLY family means to her.